Fire looks simple now because humans cheated. We have lighters, matches, gas stoves, electric igniters, and cheap little tools that make flame feel ordinary. But for ancient humans, fire was not ordinary at all. It was life, warmth, protection, cooked food, light in the dark, a weapon against cold nights and animals that had far better opinions about the food chain. So the real question is not whether ancient humans used fire, it is how they made it in the first place, before technology, before convenience, before the world handed them a spark and said, "Here, figure the rest out." That sounds almost impossible, and honestly, that is why it is interesting. Because if you strip away modern tools, making fire turns into one of the strangest survival problems in human history. There are no buttons to press, no lighter to click, no stove to turn on, just raw materials, dry conditions, patience, and a human being trying to trick physics into helping. That is the part people forget. Fire does not just appear because you need it badly enough. Ancient humans had to earn it. And there were really only two ways to do that. They could keep fire alive once it already existed, or they could make it from scratch. That difference matters a lot. Keeping fire alive is the easier part, if you can even call it easy. Imagine an ancient camp at night. Somewhere in the middle, there's a small fire glowing in the dark. That fire is more than just heat. It is survival insurance. If it goes out, somebody has to start again from zero. So groups would protect it carefully. They would feed it wood, keep it sheltered, and carry embers when moving from place to place. In a world with no lighters, an ember was priceless. A tiny glowing piece of wood could mean the difference between comfort and a complete disaster of a night. But embers do not last forever. Eventually, the fire dies, and then the real problem begins. How do you start one again? Ancient humans had to learn how to create heat from friction or sparks. That's where the story gets much more interesting, because fire-making was not one magic invention, it was a category of inventions. Different methods worked in different places with different materials and likely across different moments in human history. Some methods used friction. Others used striking stone against stone or stone against metal much later in history. But for very early humans, friction was a major root. That means the body had to do the work first. Hands, arms, strength, repetition. A person would rotate a stick against wood with enough pressure and speed to generate heat. Not enough heat at first to impress anybody, just enough to darken the wood, weaken the fibers, and slowly build a tiny ember. Tiny, fragile, ridiculously easy to lose. The kind of thing that would vanish if you so much as looked at it wrong. But if the conditions were right, that tiny ember could be fed into dry tinder and turned into flame. That's the trick. Fire was never just made, it was coaxed out of matter. If you're into this kind of survival mystery, this is exactly the lane this channel is built for. The interesting part is not the answer alone, it's how much effort the answer demanded. And that effort was serious. Ancient humans did not have random damp sticks and sloppy conditions on their side. They had to understand something about the environment. Dry tinder mattered, dry wood mattered, wind mattered, moisture mattered, time mattered. One mistake and the whole process collapsed. So making fire was not just physical labor, it was environmental knowledge. You had to know what burns, what catches, what fails, and what to keep ready before the flame is even close.
That means fire-making was probably one of the earliest places where human intelligence became visible in a practical way. Not because ancient humans sat around discussing chemistry, but because they were forced to understand cause and effect in a brutally direct setting. If the wood was wrong, no fire. If the tinder was wet, no fire. If the motion was weak, no fire. If the ember died too soon, no fire. The world did not care about effort, it cared about results. And that is what makes fire such a perfect subject for ancient human survival. It feels magical, but it was actually a test of attention, patience, and adaptation. You had to prepare the materials, create the heat, catch the ember, and feed it fast enough to stop it from dying. Every step was fragile. Every success was earned. There is also a deeper reason fire mattered so much. It changed the human body's relationship with the world. Fire made nights less terrifying. It extended activity after sunset. It allowed cooking, which made food easier to chew, easier to digest, and in some cases safer to eat. It protected groups from some animals. It changed social life around the camp. People gathered around it, watched it, maintained it, and probably depended on it emotionally as much as physically. Fire was not just a tool, it was a center. That is why losing fire would have been such a big deal. No warmth, no light, no protection, no easy cooking, no comforting glow in the dark. The fire was a kind of heartbeat for the group. And because it was so important, ancient humans likely treated it with the kind of seriousness modern people reserve for power cuts, food shortages, and Wi-Fi failures all happening at once. The funny thing is that ancient humans were not the only ones who knew fire was precious. They had to build whole habits around it. Somebody had to tend it. Somebody had to gather fuel. Somebody had to make sure it did not go out. Fire was a shared responsibility, which means it also helped shape cooperation. A group that could keep fire alive had an advantage. A group that could make it again had an even bigger one. That kind of skill would not stay hidden for long. It would spread because it worked. Eventually, people got better at it. Better tools, better methods, better understanding. But in the beginning, fire was probably one of the most difficult, useful things humans ever learned to produce on purpose. That's the part that makes it fascinating. What now feels like the simplest thing in the world may have once been the peak of survival intelligence. So, how did ancient humans make fire without technology? They used what they had: dry wood, friction, sparks, patience, knowledge, repetition, the ability to notice what the world was doing and force it to cooperate just long enough to get an ember. No machines, no matches, no easy answer, just the same human problem-solving instinct that later gave us cities, medicine, and entire civilizations. And maybe that's the real story. Fire was never just about heat. It was proof that humans could take a hostile world and turn part of it into something useful, something safe, something they controlled. The first flame was not just a survival tool, it was a statement. We're not done yet. That is why fire matters so much in human history. It was one of the first moments where ancient humans stopped merely surviving the world and started changing it. And all of it began with a tiny spark that had to be earned.